Hey guys, we're here with Steve Bashore from Mount Vernon Distillery, George Washington's distillery, and we're at Locust Grove Farm Distillery in Louisville, Kentucky right now. And I'm going to introduce Mr. Steve Bashore, and you tell us a little bit about yourself.
I work at Mount Vernon. I've worked there for about 10 years and run traditional miller by trade, but also run the distillery. And we make George Washington's original recipe rye whiskey, as well as brandy, apple and peach brandy.
Great. And what got you into the distilling trade thing, Steve?
I came through the mill, really. I came to Mount Vernon to run the water mill and manage that site, and they were just reconstructing the distillery, so I kind of got in on the ground floor, and working with other master distiller consultants, I've learned how to run our copper pot stills, which are very similar to what you see here at Locust.
Fantastic. So, and you guys, you distill basically the same way that they would have, true to the historic period?
Yeah, we do. We run wood fires. We ferment in wood barrels. Rye whiskey, so it's corn as well in there, but mostly rye grain. Growing the mash by hand, run the pot stills with the wood fires, and as much to the 18th century as we can.
Great, great, awesome. So, what do you got going on here today at Locust Grove Farm Distillery?
Well, we know from the records at Locust Grove that they bought a pot still in 1808 here, the Cron family, and so this was really what you would call a farm distillery for the family, not a commercial distillery, and they were able to recreate this here. It's not on its original location, but we know the size of the still is about what they had, and we're demonstrating for the public how they would mash and run these stills on a farm like this in early Kentucky.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, you mind to walk the audience through the operation of the still here, as far as what we've got going on, as far as how it's heated with wood, etc., and steam path?
Sure. So the head of the still is called the onion. So it can pop off, and you can disconnect the line arm here from the coil, and then you'd have the opening to pour your mash in. So the mash would ferment for about 3 days, be bucketed into the still. Once it's full, then you're going to put the onion back in place and reconnect your line arm and your coil. Then you're going to build a wood fire under here. Alcohol burns off first, so at below 170 Fahrenheit, your alcohol will basically turn to steam or vapor, float up to the head of the still, build up pressure. You're down your line arm, and in this wood barrel here is your condenser, your coil. So this spiral coil worm is in here. We're running cool water through here to condense this gas back into your distillate. We're just running water through today, obviously for demonstration, but then it's collected right here.
Fantastic. So, would they have, mostly in those days, I'm presuming that they were doing double pot still distillation, or were they just doing single passes?
They were doing doubling.
Okay.
So they would have run it through, and on average, you might have 40 proof, 50 on average for the whole batch, and then they clean the slop out. There's a drain valve in the back of the still, and then you cut a fresh, clean still to do your spirit run. Just double it to get the proof up to anywhere from 80 to 100.
Great, great. Now, were they doing cuts like what common distillers do, taking heads, hearts, and tails, or was that?
That's a great question. I think that's something maybe we don't know when that started happening in this time period. We would hope they'd take a heads cut, knowing what we know is in there. But I think some of the stuff may be something, they didn't write these things down.
Right.
So I think if they're discerning distillers and maybe have, knowledge and when they immigrated from Scotland or Ireland or wherever they came from, they would have known that, hopefully, but it's hard to know definitively if they were doing those cuts.
Yeah. Now, was there much barrel aging going on, or
Not
any
at
at all?
Not at this time. It was a white dog. It went right to market, or right to the consumer, whoever that may be, or to the family here. So I don't think the barrel aging just comes on the cusp of what's happening at Locust Grove. From what I've read, 18-teens.
Right.
1820s when the charred oak barrels were starting to be used.
Gotcha. Now, one thing that you discussed earlier when you were talking, and I thought was really interesting, I think a lot of people miss out on, and you and I spoke about this a little bit earlier too, is, of course, distilleries were commonly associated with mills, but even though we're in the same time period, there's a little bit of a difference between this distillery and the distillery that you run at Mount Vernon, and that one's an industrial distillery versus one was a farm distillery. Would you care to elaborate on that just a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, what Washington builds is multiply this still by 5. So he's building a commercial operation to be a wholesaler into a larger market in the city of Alexandria. The setup like this is really for the internal use of this farm. It also provides a product that could be used for trading out for other goods. So it's currency. If you have a little extra grain, make a little whiskey out of it. In a farm setup like this, it may only run a couple months a year, or sporadically. George Washington ran 12 months a year. So whereas this might produce 100 to 200 gallons in a year, Washington's larger commercial distillery made 11,000 gallons in 1799. So just totally high end of the commercial spectrum versus what a farmer would have.
Okay, yeah. So I guess another question I have, I know you guys have done some brandy there at the George Washington Distillery. Could you speak a little bit about types of brandies that you make and what kind of profile that was?
Well, Washington had orchards like any large landowner. He had 8,000 acres, so part of the farms were orchards. Peach and apple brandy were made. Of course, apple hard cider was part of, or Applejack was part of any early farm like that. So once he had the stills, he started to manufacture brandy. So again, they didn't age it in Virginia at that time, so it would have gone right to the table. Most of the records show that the brandy was only a little bit was sold. Much of it was consumed in his mansion for guests. So when we make our brandy, we try to use the apples that he would have used. We have a guy with an orchard in Maryland that helps us out, so we're trying to get the Newtown, Pippin, Roxbury russets, and apples like that he would have had.
Fantastic. All right. Great. Well, Steve, it's been a pleasure, man, and great to meet you and finally talk to you in person. And thanks for sharing your art with us and telling us all about distillation here and at Mount Vernon.
Thanks, Alan.
Appreciate it.
You too.